Hi, so today we're going to be talking about solfege, what it is, why it's important, and what are the notes of the scale in solfege, not only the major scale, but also the chromatic notes and how they're used, both when you sharpen the notes as well as when you flatten them. We're also going to be talking about how you can gain some fluency in solfege and why it's important. Okay. So first of all, what is solfege? So there are two systems of solfege. One is called fixed do, where you essentially use the notes, the names do, re, mi, etc., as direct substitutes for the absolute pitches C, D, E, F, G, etc. So in the system of fixed do, C is do, D is re, E is mi, F is fa, and so on, right? So here it is independent of what key one is in, right? The names of the notes, like we just use absolute pitch names instead of C, D, E, F, F sharp, etc. We just use the names of do, re, mi instead, regardless of what key one is in. What I find more interesting and also more useful is a system called movable do. So here you are moving along with the tonal center of the song. Whatever is your home sound, whatever is the tonal center of the song, that is treated as do. So, for example, if we were to do, let's say, Mary Had a Little Lamb in the key of C, right? So, right. So this is our home sound, right? So do is C, right? So it's mi, re, do, re, mi, re, re, mi, so, mi, re, do, re, mi, do, re, mi, re, do. Okay. So that is in the key of C. When we shift, let's say, to a different key, such as E major. So now E becomes your new do, right? So mi, re, do, re, mi, re, mi, so, mi, re, do, re, mi, do, re, do. Okay, so it moves along with the key wherever you are. That tonic, that home sound is do. Okay, so what are the note names? Let's stick to C major. Back again, right? So it's do, re, mi, fa, so, la, ti, do, right? And coming back down, the descending scale is do, ti, la, so, fa, mi, re, do. Okay. So these are the syllable names in solfege used for the major scale. Okay, and this will remain the same if you're using movable do. Even if you go to D major, it's going to be the same, except that all of your pitches will shift up by a whole tone. So it'll be do, re, mi, fa, so, la, ti, do, do, ti, la, so, fa, mi, re, do. Okay. So that's how it works. That is movable do solfege. Now coming to the chromatic notes. Back to C again. Okay. Now there are two different ways in which the notes can be altered chromatically. So when we say chromatic, we mean moving in semitones, right? So now, to put it very simply, we're talking about the black notes. So because the C major scale uses all the white notes, we're talking about these black notes here. So one is by shifting the pitch up a semitone. So when we do that, we label the syllable using the same consonant sound. So do, but we use E. So instead of an O, it becomes an E, which is spelled with I, with the letter I. So do becomes D, do, D, right? Re becomes re, mi does not have a sharp form here. So there's no E form of me. Me is already in E, right? Then fa becomes fi, right? Fa, fi, right? So, si, so, si. Then la, li, la, li. And T is again already a T, so it does not have a further sharpened form, right? Just like me. So those are the chromatic names in the sharpened forms of the notes of the major scale, right? So do, di. So if we were to sing it very slowly as a chromatic scale, it would be do, di, re, re, mi, fa, fi, so, si, la, ti, li, ti, do. Right? Now, while coming down, instead of E, which was used for sharps, we use A as the vowel sound. So, re when flattened. Re is an exception. We will come to it later, right? Mi becomes me. So your typical minor chord, what would normally be do, mi, so as a major, now becomes do, me, so, do, me, so. Okay. So we covered me. Now so becomes flattened as se. So se, fa. So this is often referred to as the blue note in jazz, where you actually use a flattened fifth. It's not as common in classical music, but in jazz it is fairly common. Right? So it's se, fa, me, do. Right? Then you have the flattened sixth, that is la. Its flattened form is again le. Right? So it's le, so, la, le. Right? And the flattened form of T is te. Te, la, so, te, so, ti, so, do. Okay. So we did miss out one, which was re. I said I'll come back to it later. Now re is already an A, right? So its flattened form is ra. Okay. So do, re, ra, do. Okay. Or to give an example from metal, it's do, do, ra, do, me, fa, ra, do, do, ra, do. Okay. So that's how the chromatic notes are labeled, going up as well as coming down. So while coming down, we would typically use the flattened form. So it's do, ti, te, la, le, so, se, fa, mi, me, ra, re, ra, do. Okay. So that's how we would sing a descending chromatic scale using solfege. Okay. Now it's one thing to know all of this in theory, right? In theory, it's not too complicated to understand. But why is this important to know, right? And why is it important to gain fluency in this? So one is that if you're fluent in solfege, you can be to a very large extent independent of your instrument, which means you don't need to have your instrument with you to practice. Of course, if you're a musician, if you play an instrument, you might be doing some kind of mental practice as well, which is a very good thing. So when you do that, using solfege helps us to visualize the sounds. Or actually, it's not visualize. The correct word would be audiate, which is to actually imagine the sounds in their actual accurate pitch. So solfege helps to label those finer distinctions and to be able to think about those sounds in a more intentional way and to also practice more intentionally. I've accompanied quite a lot of musicians, especially vocalists, instrumentalists, especially say on the violin, flute, and other instruments. One thing which really benefits a lot from this is intonation. because when you're playing, let's say, a C sharp, and it has, let's say, if it's part of an A major chord. So when you understand it as the third of the major scale, you think of it as the mi. So the way you would play that is altogether different from when that same note is a, say, a D flat, when it's being played in the context of, say, a B flat minor chord. Okay, because like I'll give you an example of what I mean. So this same note, right, is the same note. It's the enharmonic, right? The C sharp. It has a very different meaning, musical meaning here. But when you play it as part of this chord, it's altogether different, right? It has a different color, it has a different meaning, and you would play it with a different kind of intention in that context. So how you think about the notes musically in relation to the key in which you are, in relation to those chords, actually matters a lot. So being instrument independent. The second thing is being key independent. So uh, a lot of pieces, a lot of songs have uh, the same tune sometimes transposed to a different part. So if it's a classical sonata, you'll find large portions of the exposition are repeated exactly, or maybe with minor modifications in the recapitulation. So when that happens, it's basically that you're recognizing those patterns. So something stays the same though it's in a different key. So when you're practicing, it helps to think about it this way, that the pattern in solfege is actually staying the same. It's only the absolute names which have changed, right? We already did one example on transposition. So it's exactly the same thing. It's the same tune transposed to a different key, or the same ideas are being transposed somewhere else. It also happens in pop. So there are numerous examples of songs where you have a key change from, especially towards the end of the song, after you have, say, a couple of cycles of the verse and the chorus. Maybe after the bridge, it might go to a new key, right? A classic example is the Whitney Houston song "I Will Always Love You." So, right. So the regular chorus, let's say we're playing it in C, is okay. So this is one part of it, right? And I think there's a little, I think it's a bridge, or after the second chorus or something, there's a pause, and then there's this huge drum. Right? So it's the same tune transposed up. So your solfege names of those notes are not going to change. So the pattern, the melodic pattern is not changing on its own, it's just being transposed to a new key, right? So we talked about key independence, instrument independence, and it also helps in your understanding of theory for these same reasons. So you'll be able to see larger patterns. So especially if you're studying theory, or you think of music in terms of the chords in relative terms. So one chord, four chord, five chord, etc. So you'll find that the melody, or any melodic content in solfege, will move along with those the chord positions. So when you're transposing to a new key, you can transpose the melody using solfege. You can transpose the chords using Roman numerals, and you're done, basically, right? And it also helps in understanding passages from pieces. So, for example, um, like let's say, for example, Beethoven's Violin Concerto, though it's originally in D major, I'm playing it in C over here. So the introductory passage of the violin part, where the violin comes in after the introduction. So it's just a pattern. So you can actually practice it by singing so ti la do ti re do mi re fa ti re do mi re fa ti mi so la fa la so ti la do ti re, and so on, because that's actually how it proceeds. So you can actually understand these things in context. And by the way, even in the Beethoven example I gave, the same thing is more or less repeated in the development section. First, in the exposition, it's in D major. Later on, it's in C major in the development. right? And that way you also get a better sense of the connections between different parts of the piece. How can you gain fluency in solfege? So one is the example which I gave, which is to take passages from pieces which have a kind of repetitive pattern. So, right, so ti la do ti re do mi re fa ti re do mi re fa mi so fa la so ti la do ti re, and so on. So that's one type of example. Then you may find passages which have say an Alberti bass. So especially if you play the piano, and a lot of pieces have what is called an Alberti bass pattern. So you can convert this to solfege. So do so mi so do la fa la do so mi so ti so re so and so on, right? And you can even practice chord progressions. So for example, do mi so mi do la do mi do la fa la do la fa so ti re ti so. Okay, so these kind of patterns also help. You can even go up an octave. Let's say you can, if you're a singer or you're a violinist, you're practicing arpeggios, you can practice this, you can integrate this into your warm-ups. So for example, do mi do la do mi do la fa do la fa so ti re so. Okay, you can also practice seventh chord. That last one, which was so ti re, can be converted. You add on fa, which is the seventh. It becomes so ti re fa re ti so. Okay. Okay, and so that is a very useful way to practice, and that is how you will gain a certain amount of fluency. And then, of course, on the fly, you can take simple songs such as nursery rhymes, children's songs, and so on, and just try. You can try to make it into a game. Just convert them into do re mi. So, for example, the wheels on the bus. So do mi do re ti la so do mi do re so do. So that's way of doing. That's one example. Then, so for example, Old MacDonald is do so la so mi re do. Okay, so and you can actually teach this to children as well. These doing it as a song is always more fun than just doing it as notes going up and down and that kind of thing. So yeah, so these are the basics of solfege, and further on in this series, what we're going to do is we're going to take each one of these notes and go a little deeper into each of them. And so for one question which could arise, for example, is what's the difference between let's say D and Ra? Now the same note as we discussed today, the same note is D also in the key of C major. This note is also a D, being a raised Do. It's also a flattened Re. It's also a Ra. So when will I use it as D? When will I use it as Ra? Likewise, when is this one called Me? When is it called Re? Okay. When is this Se and when is this Fi? And what are the kind of melodic and harmonic contexts in which I would do that? So we'll go into those in further detail um, uh, with examples later on in this series. Okay. Bye. Thanks for watching.